All right, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for another Twitter Space. Today is July 20th, 2022, and this is episode 4 of the ledgerscale Internet of Value focus topic. And the focus topic we're going to have that we're speaking about today is going to be CBDCs and stablecoins. And I already see that we have a whole bunch of people who want to come up and speak, so just give me 1 second because I just want to go over why ledgerscale was founded. And what we have is a goal in mind that we want to provide educational services to not only our community, but to the entire digital asset community, and to scale up the number of brains that understand how distributed ledger technology works. And 2, we intend to one day run hardware to provide infrastructural support to the distributed ledger technology networks that we believe are ESG friendly and running a form of decentralized consensus. We host these spaces Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, starting at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. And on Wednesdays, obviously, we host the 5 to 6, where we have the focus topic. If I could just ask if everybody could give us a follow on Twitter and turn those notifications on so you know when we're going live. Because we do these not only for ourselves, because I find them very valuable, hearing things from the community every day, but because everybody else who hears them as well in the future may find it valuable. Let me get Karma up, and I'm going to invite everybody up right now.
One of the main things here is to engage the community. So if anybody has a question about the topic today, stablecoins, CBDCs, I'm sure we're going to get into some monetary policy stuff and probably commercial banking type stuff. But yeah, if you're curious about something, I guarantee somebody else is, if not many other people. And so, yeah, just if you do choose to speak up, please be cordial and welcome to the space. And I'm pretty excited about this conversation, so personally.
I am as well. I always love to speak about these potentials that have come from this blockchain innovation, right? And in the form of central bank digital currencies and stablecoins. And I know for some people it's a touchy subject when you mention central bank digital currencies, because some part of the digital asset community still, in some regard, doesn't want the banking system to exist. But I see it as such a new innovation to help change the banking system that exists today. Make it work a lot better.
Yeah, if I could, off the heels of what Def just said, right? I think you hit the nail right on the head. It can be a touchy subject within the crypto community, right? But it's an innovation that certainly brings a lot of benefits, right? And we know what some of the potential drawbacks are, right? If it gets used as, a surveillance tool and information gets shared that they don't want to share. We know what the risks of censorship, right? We know what the risks are, but those risks already exist, right? And so at the end of the day, it's still bringing an improvement, even if it's not completely removing the risk. And one thing that I like to remind people of is, unlike in the past, even if the CBDC becomes a little intrusive to you, at least at this point in time in our history, you have a choice to move the value somewhere else, right? And so overall, I feel it to be a net positive, and I'll be listening to hear other people's opinion on it.
Well, I think it's important at least to kind of start off this conversation, because I do want to keep this focused. Just kind of define, okay? What is the difference between a CBDC and a stable coin? And then there's multiple types of stable coins too, right? So that depends on the collateral backing the stable coin. So, and I know we talk about this in these chats kind of somewhat often, but like a CBDC is a little, like, it's not a little bit, it's basically like a, I don't know, digital version of paper cash. If it's designed appropriately, one of the things I think it's so exciting is it might enable new monetary tools, monetary policy tools. I think that's a good thing. I think that can add some balance to the system. We can get into that later in the chat if we want to. And then you've got stable coins, which, because the CBDC is that's obviously not a private asset, versus the CBDC, or I'm sorry, versus the stable coins. These are assets issued by private companies. So it's kind of like your bank balance, like your money in the bank. Okay, the money in your money in the bank is a liability of a private company. So then you have to start asking the question, and there's like basically two directions this can unfold. But what's on the asset side of the balance sheet? So you either have like the CBDC or USDC route, where sorry, there's so many freaking acronyms. The USDC route, where
I was going to say maybe if we if just stick it to like CBDCs, go over all of the different variations that we might see come of the different types of CBDC formats that they might want to roll out, and then maybe talk about stablecoins, and then the both combined. I think good to break them apart, so you don't have to worry about fussing around.
Well, yeah, there's definitely two different. They're completely different from a balance sheet situation. CBDCs, you have various design principles. I don't know that I've seen a solution that's a perfect check every box type solution yet. But yeah, the CBDCs, one of the things I'm most excited about, at least you have distribution matters. Okay, so wholesale or retail. Can you have an interest rate on a CBDC? That's a whole nother question. That opens up big time monetary policy options, and which I actually think are should be opened up. I think that would be beneficial to from like a reducing systemic risk type of point of view.
Real time monetary policy.
What's that?
Real time monetary policy making.
Well, I don't know if they would do it real time, but it's mostly, I feel like it would be a balance. So, okay, one of the worst thing, okay, the nightmare in monetary policy is like a bank run. All right. And I was just talking to someone, they said that like in China, that I guess the Rural Bank of China froze everybody's accounts.
Yeah, the Bank of China, they have tanks outside of it right now, blocking the protesters, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. This is what you don't want. Okay. That's a, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know any details. I literally just talked to someone for about 10 minutes, I don't know, 20 minutes ago about this, and I didn't know about it, and I haven't read anything about it, and I know nothing. But it's scratch and sniff test, bank run. So that's like really, you don't want tanks outside your banks, right? Like, yeah, this is bad. This is what you don't want. And so I think if you have a CBDC, which is cash, then because it's a direct liability of the central bank, You have the distribution, so wholesale, retail. I don't think retail CBDC, that didn't seem to make sense to me, because at that point you're asking the central bank to handle consumer relationships, like direct consumer relationships. That's not what central banks do, man. That's just not their job. So wholesale CBDC, granted, that does throw an intermediary in between, because the CBDC is issued in some sense a lot like the way the commercial banking system works, to a licensed bank that has an account with the central bank. Doesn't matter which country, same thing everywhere. And so then you have to say, well, what sort of, and I shouldn't have said commercial bank there, that was a mistake, but it could be just like a money service business. So the difference between a commercial bank and a money service business is the business model. So if you have like a money service business and they have an account with the Fed or the central bank, and they get CBDC, they can reissue that to like you and me, right? But they're not doing fractional reserve, so there's no lending, there's no leverage creation, all this kind of stuff, which is very important. I'm making light of it when I say all this kind of stuff. It's actually extremely important. Versus going from like having a reserve account at the central bank where you're a commercial bank, and then you practice fractional reserve, and now you're creating leverage in the sort of monetary system. There's a huge difference there. And I think there's a couple of aspects here where we, being like, humans or humanity, have an opportunity. This is just my opinion, so I can be dead wrong. But I think we have an opportunity here where we can complete building a system that we haven't really fully completed, in my opinion. Because if we have, okay, we've got the commercial banking system, and they practice fractional reserve, and that's really cool. That's great. It's successful. It's got its flaws, like a bank run, like tanks in front of the banks, right? You don't want that. But, if we can add a counterweight on the other side of that, and at a systemic level, and have kind of CBDCs distributed through, say, like a narrow bank, which in current today, we see effectively these crypto exchanges are effectively practicing the narrow banking business model. Because if I put a Bitcoin in the exchange, they have a Bitcoin. Okay, all the problems that are going on right now in the crypto market are because when I put a Bitcoin in that exchange, they took a portion of it and lent it out. Okay, so they basically took the same risk that existed with the commercial bank fractional reserve business model and introduced that to the crypto market. Does that make any sense, or maybe I'm getting too far ahead of myself?
You're on the dot.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So, okay, so now the other cool thing that I think is this actually, I'm such a freaking nerd. This actually gets me excited. So think of the idea that, okay, now you've got this digital embodiment of cash, right? Let's say the Federal Reserve, and it doesn't matter. Maybe it's a good reason, maybe it's a bad reason. Who cares? But let's say for some reason they want to pay me a return on my cash, right? Like I've got a $20 bill in my pocket. They want to pay me some sort of interest rate on that. Or, yeah. So right now, the only mechanism with which they can effectuate that desire, that to pay a return, is basically like kind of like inflation. And then this is why I don't think a lot of people realize, certainly not in the mainstream, like, oh, inflation's bad. Well, it exists for a reason. It's an interest rate on cash. Okay, it's a negative interest rate, right? But the thing is, central banks currently they can't. Okay, so they can't add. They can't counterweight or push back. The only tool central banks have currently, from a mechanically point of view, to push back on inflation is to raise rates, right? But when they raise rates, that goes through the commercial banking system. Well, the commercial banking system creates leverage. Why? Fractional reserve. It's the business model. Okay, so if you had like a CBDC and all of a sudden you get a bunch of inflation, yeah, this happens, and you can not raise rates on the reserves, which are the root foundational accounting unit for your bank deposits. So everybody's money in the bank, right? Like, it's actually backed up by reserves. So the interest rate on those reserves, if you raise the interest rate on that, there's a leveraged economic response in the system. Okay? Versus, and this is what doesn't exist currently, which I'm hopeful does in the future. And I can be wrong. We'll see.
Going into the stablecoin CBDC combo.
Well, sort of. But I'm just talking strictly CBDC right now. Cool. Because okay, so now let's flip to a different system architecture where the central bank has reserves as a liability and CBDC as a liability. The reserves go off to the commercial banks. They practice fractional reserve. The CBDC goes off to narrow banks. They don't do fractional reserve. They charge fees like the crypto exchanges do, right? I mean, every crypto exchange that's gotten in trouble is because they were using leverage. I mean, this is not rocket science. And so if you can actually pay an interest on, like, say, that $20 bill in my pocket, like, you could raise or lower that interest rate. Okay. And then I, as an individual actor in the economy, I have to choose. Do I want to hold my $20 in my pocket and earn, say, 1 or 2% interest, or whatever the central bank's paying, or this is just not possible today, just as a practical matter? Or do I want to go hold? So this is theoretical. Or do I want to hold my balance in a commercial bank that's paying me? Well, I'm really actually scared this commercial bank's going to go under, right? Because all of the money's not there. They've lent it all out. So there's a lot more risk. The risk profile here is different. Okay, I'm just kind of running through the thought train of a individual actor. And so, I'm worried about this commercial bank. Maybe I don't want to have my money. Maybe give me the cash, man. let me cash out, like, right? Like, I don't want to do this with the fractional reserve, and the money's not all there, and and so I can go get 2% from the central bank, and the money's there because, like, that's money. That's how it is. And uh so the central bank could, say, lower the interest rates, making CBDC less attractive, and I'm ending the point here, making CBDC less attractive, okay, discouraging me, the individual actor in the economy, from, say, pulling my money out of the commercial bank. And then the commercial banks could simultaneously raise their interest rates, making it more attractive for me to say, you know what, screw this CBDC stuff. I want some of those bank deposits, man. Those things are paying out pretty good, right? I'm willing to take the risk, like that. Not all the money's in the bank, and I feel like there's a balancing act that's like a subtle kind of balancing act. I don't know how else to put it. This dynamic has not really been written about or studied very much because it doesn't exist yet. I hope that's where we get, and we can step over to stable coins too. But that CBDC is the root. Stable coins are kind of a offshoot.
I think if we would be about the different variations of stablecoins right now, and then how some of them could fit into play with CBDCs.
Well, there's basically two different types of stable coins, and it's two different types of collateral. Is really you've got, if the collateral is well, let's expand that to three. So, because in some sense, I think there's going to be a convergence between stable coins and commercial banks. So, you've got stable coins that are backed by, like, a USDC. Okay, in their model, the stable coin is backed by short-term treasuries. So it's backed by future dollar. So your dollar, whatever USDC is, it's backed by a future dollar, but it's not like 10 years out. It's like 2 months, 1 month, 30, 60 days, I mean, right? So, you can get your dollar, like, in terms of liquidity risk and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's backed by a dollar. I sort of like that better. That's a narrow banking business model, in essence. Okay. The other model is, let's say I have like one of these other stable coins. I'm not going to say any names, but that's backed by crypto. Okay, so I got a stable coin, but it's the collateral on the asset side of the balance sheet. It's all backed by Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum, whatever. It doesn't matter. And nope, hang on a second. So then the other, sorry. So you got collateral that's backed by actual treasuries or dollars. You've got collateral that's actually backed by crypto. The other option, which is my least favorite, put the sour candy in your mouth and grimace face, is a CBDC that's backed by, but I think this is kind of probably where it's going to go, is backed by like a commercial bank deposit. So you got $100, quote unquote, in the bank, right? So you can print $100 of stablecoin. All right, but where'd the money go in the bank? Well, it got lent out. So you're right back to reintroducing, from a systemic risk perspective, the fractional reserve, leverage creation, all this stuff, which is not bad. But if you go right back to reintroducing the same risk, it's like taking both people and putting them on the same side of the teeter-totter. How much balance are you going to get? None. Right? Like, you just put both people on the same side of the teeter-totter. Like, what do you think's going to happen? You didn't have to think about this stuff too hard. So there's kind of, I guess, three types of, but it all boils down to what's the collateral, what's on the assets, because the stable coin's a liability of the stable coin operator. So what's on the asset side? What balances that out? And that's a key question. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, and listen, if anybody in the audience, you have any questions, feel free, hit the request to come up. If you want to stop us in the middle of what we're saying and just kind of ask, certain questions pertaining to any of the sorry, I had a brain melt. It's kind of a hot day, but any of the information that Karma's speaking about, please just feel free to come up. Keep going though, Karma. I'm enjoying it.
No, you're good, man. You know what's nice? A slight change of subject is when it's summertime in Florida, you get these afternoon storms, and it actually like really cools down. And I'm seeing all these heat waves across Europe and other parts of the US, and I'm like, it's quite comfortable here in Florida.
Yeah, it's a good 95 today, I think, by me.
Yeah, same here.
It's probably 70 something, upper 70s with a nice breeze. It's beautiful, man. Anyway, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I just find it ironic. And when I lived in DC for a couple of years, I would talk to my mother, and it would be like, it's colder in Florida than it is in DC. So it was kind of funny, like, how things work.
Karma, I was on holiday down there, and we were staying at Universal Studios somewhere in Florida, and I went into a store to get some drinks and stuff like that, a little convenience store. It might be in a 7-Eleven. I walked in there. It was beautiful blue sky, maybe a cloud in the sky. And in the time I was walking around looking at stuff, this storm goes by, and there's like people scrambling into the store, and it was raining super hard. The palm trees outside were pretty much, 45 degrees. And it really came out of nowhere. I was pretty amazed. It actually became, I thought, dangerous to go outside. So I just hunkered down in the store for a little bit, hoping that the windows weren't going to break, and it passed through. But yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, storms can come in pretty quick. I mean, more than one time, more than a couple dozen times. I've been standing on one side of the street and it's like pouring down rain on the other, but I'm good. Like, it's weird. They're like pocketed storms. And anyway, we can get back to crypto. I don't want to get off topic too much because this is a focus chat. But yeah, it's weather's interesting.
Yeah,
we could.
I noticed in kind of both your examples, Karma, if the monetary policy for, wrapped around the CBDC or the stable coin kind of stays in the traditional model, right? Nothing really changes from that perspective, right? You're just kind of changing the infrastructure that the system is ultimately running on, right? And that's all kind of like just comes down to decision which way do they ultimately go with it. I think what we definitely get from the CBDCs and the stable coins outside of the monetary policy is an acknowledgement that the future is definitely going to be digital, right? And so in order for a digital world to really exist, because I believe perpetually for most of our futures, right, we'll see a parallel system. There won't be an absolute digital or an absolute legacy. And so what the CBDC and the stablecoin does, it becomes the bridge that allows the digital world to run in parallel with the legacy world, and it becomes that interoperable tool, right, that ties all this stuff together. So I think that's ultimately what the CBDCs and stablecoins become, and we'll have to see what policy they, get implemented into. But yeah, cool.
Well, I more or less agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think there's two different sides of the spectrum. So I'm back to my stupid spectrum thing. But on one side of the spectrum, you have sort of retail CBDC, which I think is not really viable. I mean, it's interesting. It's fun to think about, I guess, but it's not really realistic. And then you have stable coins that are directly one for one, no leverage creation, hence one for one, backed by a CBDC. So that's your wholesale distribution, narrow banking business model, which introduces some balance. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you have your stable coins that are effectively just backed by commercial bank deposits, in which case, if the world goes that direction, nothing changes, right? Like nothing changes. You still have it. Let's pretend the first thing I said doesn't exist and never exists, and we just do a digital version of effectively commercial bank deposits. Nothing changes. Sure, it's digital, cool, whatever, but like nothing fundamentally changed when Delta made a website, right? Like they still fly airplanes. That's it. That's what they do. Like, because you bought the ticket through a website doesn't mean anything about flying that airplane changed. Versus if you have this narrow banking business model, CBDC distributed with a lack of leverage. That's the key. With a lack of leverage. I feel like that brings some balance to the system. Now, I was watching a thing that Greg Kidd was talking about earlier today. Actually, I tweeted it. I should probably throw that tweet up top. And he made a good point. Okay, so I'm making the point that this lack of leverage in the narrow banking business model is a good thing. Okay, he made the opposite point, that if you have a bunch of value that's in the economy, right, that's distributed, through this narrow banking, non-leveraged business model, which is another term for discipline, that's bad, right? Because if you distributed that same amount of value through the fractional reserve commercial banking business model, you get a bunch of leverage. And, well, this didn't pan out in reality, but theoretically anyhow, I mean, not in 08, it didn't anyway. But theoretically, if you distribute $100 into the fractional reserve business model there's now $1,000. Let's pretend a 10% reserve ratio. You now have $1,000 in the economy because they're going to lend out $90 of that $100 or whatever. Maybe I screwed up the numbers there, but so there's a difference between money and credit, and most people don't realize. I mean, this is kind of counterintuitive because it's not what you're told when you're growing up and everything, but most people don't realize, like, your money in the bank is by and large credit, and that's just the facts. I don't know how else to say that. So his point was, you could harm the economy because effectively, if you go to like a CBDC that's distributed through, say, like a crypto exchange, aka narrow banking business model, non-leverage creating business model, then you would have a deleveraging for the entire economy, and that would be bad. And his point stands. It's a good point. So I've just given you both sides of the argument there. And he's right, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. Like, there's I think both there's soundness fundamentals to both points. They're just arguing on other sides of the spectrum, if you will. And I'm not really going to argue with Greg Kidd. I mean, if he's speaking, I'm listening. Like, he's a smart guy. Like that. Yeah. So, I hear his point. I don't 100% agree with it, but I still hear it, understand it, give it validity. Like, it's totally a valid point. I don't know. I hope that made sense, because I did just kind of say two opposite things.
It all made sense to me. And we have the elephant and Ramiro. You guys came up. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask anything about what Karma was talking about and Kashta and us. Or if you just like to have some input and say what you're thinking.
Yeah, we're getting into the back half of the chat here. Yeah, do all the follow, like, and all subscribe, that kind of stuff. Sorry, just to throw that in there.
And turn those notifications on if you subscribe to us at ledgerscale. And if you could also at our YouTube, ledgerscale, because we are streaming these live every single day from Twitter to YouTube, just in case you prefer that platform. But Tony, go ahead, man. You had your hand up.
Hey guys, yeah. So
Wait a second, Tony, real quick. I'm sorry. I'll shut up real quick. We're also getting things going on LinkedIn, so add that to the list if you're a user of that platform. All right, I'm done. Go for it, Tony.
Yeah, no problem, Karma. So U.S. lawmakers are going to be introducing a bill against stablecoins next week on the 27th. And two of the writers of the bill are Maxine Waters and Patrick Mahenry. So it's scheduled to be introduced, next week on the 27th. And it says here, the current draft of the bill would mandate that stablecoin issuers maintain 100% reserves and bar them from lending stablecoins to customers. It also says stablecoins would be no.
Sorry, go. Well, the question is, what is the nature of the reserves? Because the reserves is like a stupid way of saying what's on the asset side of the balance sheet. Is what's on the asset side of the balance sheet commercial bank deposits? In which case, we're reintroducing the fractional reserve business model, or Or, and it can't be, at least not in dollars, because this doesn't exist yet, is what's on the asset side of the balance sheet, CBDC, aka a direct liability of the central bank, right? That's the big key. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go.
You're good, Karma. Yeah, that's a good point you made. You're good. So it goes on and it says stablecoins will be known as payment stablecoins under the legislation, and bank and non-bank issuers would operate under the same regulations. The Federal Reserve would license any non-stablecoin issuers and will be responsible for monitoring those firms' financial health according to people. There will also be strict rules on the types of assets that can back stablecoins and a prohibition on commercial companies such as Walmart, Home Depot being issuers.
Oh, that last part's interesting.
But do you take that as a good thing or a bad thing? I take it as a good thing, actually. Yeah.
It's a good. I think we're gonna get most ironic thing. Okay, think about this. What are stable coins? Okay, they're a derivative of crypto, right? They well, not really. I mean, maybe that's not the perfect word. They're a second embodiment of using cryptocurrency methodologies. They're not really a derivative. Well, I mean, they could be depending on how you structure it. But like if it's backed by crypto, it's a derivative. But cutting out the Home Depot, Walmart, see, there's a whole line of thinking about where companies, and I mean, we've talked about it in these spaces where, like, you know, you got companies like Google and Facebook and like Apple, and dude, they got so much money they don't know what to do with it. I mean, honestly, it's a problem. Like it's a nice problem.
Well, Apple has over 120 or I think over 160 billion dollars offshore, and they've been wanting to. Well, they say they want to bring it back home. However, they'd be taxed about almost 50% on it if they do. And that's something that has been going on since way before the Obama administration. And they tried to get something done during the Trump administration because he was very tax friendly with companies, with big corporations, but nothing was really done.
Well, that's actually a good point. I haven't heard that point before. I wonder if there could be efforts to evolve the methodologies of stable coins. And I do think where I was going with my prior comment was it's almost ironic that these stable coins are likely to get regulatory clarity before the actual crypto that they're based on. I mean, what a slap in the face to crypto, honestly.
Yeah, and I definitely think that the first thing that we're going to get any sort of regulation on is going to be the stablecoin market. And perpetually, it could be like a blessing in disguise from the long run, but I think if it ends up being that, right, stablecoin, perhaps Tether, is as we've talked about, right? They look into the things backing Tether. I think there's a potential downfall of a lot of the liquidity that exists. But back to the stablecoin metrics, I think we should run over how stablecoins and CBDCs could play into each other and in a harmonious system.
Well, that's part of, I mean, we kind of did already. That's where I was talking about the, you know, if you have an interest rate on CBDCs slash narrow bank wholesale issued stable coins where they're not practicing the fractional reserve business model, it provides a deleveraging functionality to the economy, which is a counterweight to the commercial banking fractional reserve business model, which is a like a re-leveraging of the economy, right? So I think it's good, right? Like right now, the only option we have in the economy is either paper cash. That's the only deleveraging and so aspect or option. So, you know, compared to like commercial bank deposits, which are 100% leveraged, like levered, they bring leverage into the economy, which is a desirable. It's good. But you know, too much of a good thing is still bad. That's kind of where I see that. I mean, I guess to boil it down, like I think the system is probably more well balanced and better off if the system has a non-leveraged option that can contrast and like ride the other side of the teeter-totter to the leveraged option. The commercial bank deposits are the leveraged option right now. The only non-leveraged option we have is paper cash. And I think if we have a digital version of paper cash, the CBDC, however it's distributed, I don't think retail distribution of that is going to be realistic, but whatever. And that at least puts another player on the other side of the teeter-totter. I mean, if you do these stable coins and they're backed one for one by commercial bank deposits, I mean, I just for a visual, like literally, it's like taking both people and putting them on the one side of the teeter-totter. Like, this isn't going to be a real fun teeter-totter. Like, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to sit on the ground. You know? Like, again, you don't have to think about some of this stuff too hard. Just what other outcome would you how I mean, I'm scratching my head literally, like what else would you expect to happen? Are you just going to recreate the same wheel? I think we have an opportunity here to create a new wheel, like in a way. By the way, okay, as a side note, there's a guy that actually did reinvent the wheel. And what he did was, I think it's 4 parabolas, and he connected them together. And then it turns out if you connect 4 parabolas together, they turn into they'll actually roll. And it was an accident. Actually, he was doing some stupid stuff in the lab, and the thing fell off the counter or whatever and rolled across the floor. And he was like, "What? That thing rolls?" And then all of kind of clicked, like all of a sudden. But yeah, there's no need. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good thing to have a deleveraged, narrow banking business model, CBDC backed. Somebody sitting on the other side of the teeter-totter option.
I'll just approach it.
Sorry, I'll shut up real quick. To just go back and double down on the commercial bank business model. Put the whole system on one side of the teeter-totter. Like, why even have the teeter-totter if you don't have someone on the a business model on the other side? It's to have one deleveraged option versus one leveraged option. Like, you should have both options. You want both options. I'll shut up.
No, I was going to just say I'll approach the question a different way, Death, in that as I was kind of alluding to before, right? We've digitized, we, look at it from a market cap perspective, right? $1 trillion today, right? And the only way that $1 trillion in value interoperates in the real world, right, is via these on and off ramps, right? So Stellar kind of has given us one model of how they're trying to use the CBDC, right, to better facilitate that on and off ramp so that value can move in and out and interact with the real world, right? So because crypto can't be deposited into these banks the way Stellar is using the stable coin at this point is they're like, okay, well, we'll work with a Texas bank. The Texas bank is willing to work with, USDC, quote unquote, the stable coin, right? And it provides that perfect kind of seamless interaction between the digital world, right, and the legacy world to provide these on and off ramps, right, so that value can then operate into the real world. Because ultimately, this comes down to how do you on and off ramp the value that is in the digital world? Otherwise, it's just stuck on the digital side of things, right? And so, to me, that's this whole CBDC stablecoin functionality is bridging the legacy world, right, with this digital world, and how how it's going to interact with the ultimate, like Karma's kind of describing, the banking world that facilitates that interaction.
Well, Castia, there's an old video. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. Bill Gates at Sibos. I'm assuming you know what Sibos is, or that's like Swift's banking conference. So he talked about, he more or less read these bankers the riot act, was my interpretation of his speech. But he pointed out that, I think this was Somalia, that once about 70% of the economic activity starts to transfer across the digital methods, then people quit cashing out. In terms of like, give me my paper cash, or my bank account, put it in my bank account, like people are like, actually, like, I don't really want money in my bank account. Like, will you just, I'd rather keep my money in my digital account so that I can actually use it. Like, there's a tipping point there. There's other science I've seen where the tipping point is more around 2/3. But hey, what's the difference between 2/3 and 70%? 4%? So yeah, roughly about the same.
I'll tell you, initially when stable coins kind of became a thing in my consciousness, I was surprised that we didn't see more pushback by the regulation side, right? Even more so than the crypto side, because I think if you allow an unregulated stablecoin issuer, right, at least for anybody who's in my age bracket, right, I just viewed it or perceived it as a whole counterfeiting operation, man. It's like ultimately that's the systemic risk that you face to a legacy system is you have an unbridled counterfeiting operation going around printing dollars. Like that to me, that would have been a bigger threat than any Bitcoin or anything else could have been. I was surprised they didn't slam down on that very hard. So I think they will rein in the reins real quick because ultimately, right, that's what you have with an unregulated, unmonitored, unverified reserve, dollar issuer. You know what I'm saying? Is you have a counterfeiting operation.
What if I told you that your gut was right? And that's probably why we're going to see stablecoin regulation before crypto regulation. And I know you've been in some of these chats, but that's why I think we've seen, Gary Gensler used to say, oh, CBD or CFTC, and God, dude, all these freaking alphabet soups, CFTC versus SEC. All of a sudden he's talking CFTC, SEC, and banking regulations. That's how they're going to do the stable coins, through the banking regulations. And I do see up on time here.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, I think if we do see it quick, it goes back to what I heard Def say, I think it was yesterday, is that we might see it out of the Treasury Department, right, with their authority to make regulations even faster than Congress at this point. Because if you remember the back and forth that Elizabeth Warren had with the lady from the Treasury, right, she kept asking, well, is it a systemic risk? And she says, no, your authorization is supposed to preempt when it becomes an actual threat, right? If you even think that it's going to be a systemic threat. And a counterfeiting operation, by definition, is a systemic threat. So I think if they keep framing it in that way, the Treasury is going to be the most expeditious way of them coming down with some very quick regulations on stablecoins in general. So that's what I'd be looking for.
Well, I'll tell you what's a systemic risk, and you're right. Treasury Department can certainly make rules faster than Congress. That's a systemic risk. We should have the lawmakers actually, doing their job, like making laws versus arguing with each other about red team, blue team, who gives a shit. Like, that's a systemic risk. Now, I do think they see the stable coins, and I would agree, if the stable coins are backed by some sort of other asset. It could be lumber, it could be Bitcoin, it could be XRP, it could be gold, whatever, who cares? Whatever it is, if the stable coins are backed by a non-USD, like if it's backed by short-term treasuries, that doesn't bother me. That's kind of passes the scratch and sniff test. That means dollars for dollars, right? And it's a short duration, whatever. That's fine. But you want to talk about your systemic risk? It's a non-functioning Congress. I mean, other countries are going to take advantage of that. But yeah. And we've got a couple more minutes. I don't know, Death, did you have something else? I'm sorry, I maybe talked too much here.
No, listen, I know this is a topic you like, so I like to hear your words on it. And just like Koshka was saying before, right? If it really comes down to it becoming a systemic risk, the U.S. Treasury can enact the Dodd-Frank Act, which was put in during the Bush era, I think the first Bush. And what this does is gives the United States Treasury the ability to use FSOC, which is the Financial Stability Oversight Council, to enact whatever needs to be done. Right? If they deem something like Tether a systemic risk, it's typically like something like agents showing up at everybody who works at Tether's house, and hopefully
all
doesn't.
13 people.
What'd you say, Tony?
There's like 13 people that work at Tether, which is mind blowing considering how much they claim they have.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that hard. But and I think that would be the we need. Sorry, go ahead.
I know a guy who had the Treasury Department knock on his door. You don't want that knock.
You don't want that knock, no. But I hope we get some congressional decisions before then, and I think stablecoins will probably be the first thing that has some sort of regulatory clarity behind it. The question really comes down to it is what happens after that, and I am just happy to see what we're going to get.
Wouldn't that if they declare Tether a systemic risk, wouldn't that already kill the market?
If they declare Tether a systemic risk, well, first thing they're going to do is they're going to go after all of the guys in Tether and they're going to audit the books, right? Forcefully. Right, break in the offices, take the computers, the whole 9 yards. And after they have proof that there is no actual value there, then they put up a statement saying that there's no value there, and then the market takes a huge hit. And they basically said we did what we had to do to protect the systemic risk of this, becoming any bigger. And it's just like the Bernie Madoff thing, right? They got him, they put him in jail, but all the people who were hurt by him, unfortunately, they were hurt by him, and it's not really like repercussions that could be made. If there's no value, there's no value there.
Yeah, just quickly, because I know y'all getting ready to end it, but Tony, your question kind of assumes like is a lot of the illegitimate or potentially illegitimate tether, right, being used to inflate the price of some of these assets, right? And so if that assumption proves to be true, then the lack of that liquidity based on not having access to that fraudulent funds would hurt the assets that tether predominantly goes into, right? And so I do a lot of volume research, and I try to show that one of the things that is positive to XRP is that Tether has traditionally been a small fraction of the volume as a percentage going into XRP, right? And so that means it has less influence. If you look at some of the other assets, right, like Bitcoin, or even I think I looked at Ethereum, one of them today, it was like as high as 60% just Tether alone, right? So something like that, if those illegitimate funds are going into those assets, right, it could definitely hurt those assets. But on the positive side, traditionally, Tether has always been one of the least influenced assets to XRP's volumes. So
Well,
I just
Cash,
wanted to.
it's
But
not illegitimate funds, and you are definitely on point. But it's
Right.
not illegitimate funds; it's leverage creation.
Well, I
And
was using the term illegitimate because if we're just going for dollar, right? Let's say, for instance, you're claiming that you have $100 in reserves, right? But you actually print $500 in Tether, right? To me, that $400 is actually counterfeit, and so to me, it's just illegitimate in that perspective, right? So, but I get what your point is.
but I mean, that's how fractional reserve works. I mean, you
No,
can't call a fractional reserve bank illegitimate. I mean, these banks have been
Well, if it
years.
was Tether, with that doesn't have the regulatory clarity.
right, because in the fractional reserve model, it's still legitimate dollars that are being leveraged, right? Now, if I go out and print some, actual counterfeit dollar on some paper that looks good enough, and I get the right ink, right? That's not a fractional reserve situation. It's just me adding illegitimate dollars. If I'm allowed to use those dollars, turn around and buy Bitcoin, then I'm inflating the price of Bitcoin with illegitimate dollars, right? So that's kind of the context that I was using it in.
Well, what you're talking about is effectively creating a positive feedback loop, and that's you know that can be good.
It's a full out Ponzi scam if that's what it is.
Right, which is the potential risk whenever a lot of us are talking about Tether's risk to the overall market, right? If in fact a lot of that is not, because think about it, most of the risk actually is the people who have their money in Tether who cannot then get access back to their dollars that they're expecting to get for that Tether, right? So they're taking the bulk of the risk. They're the ones that are immediately going to lose if Tether goes under, right? It's people who think that they can redeem those Tethers for dollars, and it's not directly affecting the price of the other assets in the market, right? But as I stated, if 60% of those are going into Bitcoin on any given day, right, and some of it is quote unquote illegitimate, right, or whatever terminology you want to use, right, then the lack of that liquidity is definitely going to affect those asset prices.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that question with regards to Tether or Tony's question with it, I agree with what everyone says there. I think though that what people are forgetting that Tether, although they are insolvent now, I firmly believe that they're insolvent at this point because if you're looking at the history with regards to Tether, that commercial paper backing that they so-called are trying to reduce at this point in time, the value of that just on a market basis alone to what's happening on the macro side must be about 50% of what that value was when they initiated that thing, right? So you can re-rotate that to the Bitcoin and try to hold value within that Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, they're insolvent. But they're not going to be called out because how big they are or how vast their reach is with regards to the basic pairing of USDT to a variety of assets right now. USDC is trying to get there, so until USDC gets on par with those kinds of pairings to all these different assets that are out there, I don't think the government at all is interested in pulling the rug out on Tether at this point, right? Because you need to have that other substitute asset to sort of soak up that sort of liquidity that would come into USDC. So, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say go. Sorry. So you're saying that they wouldn't just pull the rug on it So would an investigation or a full-blown audit be more likely?
Yeah, it is, but which regulations will they lean those investigations and laws on, right? Um, it's as though you have to have all governments that have significant exposure to this, or their private entities have significant exposure, all come together and agree to go after that thing, right? Although these regulations, yes, they could potentially come. Um, Given the fact that it's still a massive player, you don't want to take down Tether to crash a a different sort of financial sector that's still blossoming, right? The government needs this 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 financial sort of sector to blossom first before they take out the biggest pillars on it. So as much as I think that yes, Tether is bad, people they need to get this taken care of right away. I don't think it's the interest of the government to do it, and that's why they're sort of long playing this. They've been talking about Tether for years, right? People know about this, at least people that have been in this space, but they're still in that growth stage that they want to get as many people adopted to this so that they can sort of platform and use it at some point as a hedge to this sort of financial switch that they're planning. That's all I'm saying. I mean, you know, people have different thoughts on this, but the more they get away with stuff, the more you go, well, how are they getting away with that stuff, right? I mean, they've been talking about this commercial paper, and now Tether's pushing the idea that, oh, well, by the way, we're not doing as much commercial paper. We're actually buying short-term treasuries and U.S. cash now, right? What is their cash equivalent? 4% of their entire asset
Yeah,
portfolio? I mean,
what's
it's ridiculous.
is the cash a commercial bank deposit? Okay, so now we just reintroduced the fractional reserve banking model risk. Like, you know, I mean, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're about at time. Death, I don't know. You want to wrap it up or you want to keep going?
Well, we had just Khalid came up and GDLT just came up. So I just want to ask Khalid if you had a question, and same with GDLT. If you guys had any questions about everything we've been talking about, go ahead and then we'll wrap the space up.
Oh, it's all good. I just got in. Just saying hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. I wanted to tell Egyptian Muhammad to get his YouTube channel back. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think Viable. Thank you for coming up.
Just so one quick thing. Last year, Tether came out with a report and said that 49% of the USDT was backed by unspecified commercial paper. Just wanted to mention that because Karma was talking about it just a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, unspecified. Correct. Best thing.
Hey, if it's unspecified, I got some commercial paper I'll sell you. You want me to? What do you want me to? Just go ahead and write me a check, and I'll give you some unspecified collateral. And didn't it sound like a great idea? I mean, come on, man. Just give me like $1 million, you know? Like, come on.
Perfect, man.
That's crazy. It's crazy talk.
Any question you had about what we were speaking about, Viable?
Yeah, you guys are saying that you don't recommend using US Tether at all. Is that what I'm getting at?
I personally won't touch it, no.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, just for that inherent risk, I'm waiting for the moment where, how we were just talking about, we believe it will become insolvent. And so when that moment happens, that's it. Your Tether is virtually worthless. No exchange is going to want to trade for it. Nothing, everything shuts down that would trade with Tether. And so essentially you just lose your value. And that's one of the fears, problems that we're facing.
Wait, are you talking about, or are you talking about Terra Luna, or are you talking about Celsius? I'm not sure.
He said Tether.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was a joke.
Yeah. And so
So do you guys recommend USDC or none of that?
I personally like USDC. They're backed by short-term treasuries or cash. They have big investors like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs, and they're backed by Circle, which is attached to the DCG group, which is pretty reputable. So if I'm going to use a stable coin, it's going to be USD. Yeah.
And if you're able to use Uphold, go with USD.
Understood.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for coming up and asking that question. Well, everybody, I think that's it for the night. I think we're gonna cut it here. Just want to say that everything we talk about is not financial advice, and not really good at that whole line thing. And I shouldn't have been a lawyer, but yeah, not financial advice. Always recommend
Too late, Death.
do
I
your
already
own
bought some
research into
USDT.
everything. What'd you say, Tony?
Too late. I already bought some Tether.
I just want to thank everybody that comes up to speak, and thank everybody who listens to this in the future. We wouldn't be doing these if everybody in the community didn't find them valuable. And I love you guys, and we will see everybody tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you could subscribe to Ledger Scale on Twitter and turn notifications on, so you know we're going live.
And LinkedIn. We're doing LinkedIn now too. We're getting that going. So there's an extra
ramping things up.
Well, I mean, I think I want to keep this stuff professional. To me, Twitter is kind of a bit of a silly thing. LinkedIn is more professional. So anyway, yeah, please do join. We do need to get the Twitter thing over 1,000 subscribers, so that actually matters. It's not just us asking for subscribers. There's things that we need to do that we can't do until we have over 1,000. So that's actually very helpful. So please, if you haven't already, and yeah, thank you guys for joining. I hope this was a good use of your time. I don't know. Death, you got anything else? I mean,
that's it. Love everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow.